All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are watching from or listening. We want to welcome you to Paradox East Radio and our special guest, Mr. Andy Anderson Rogers, here to talk about some interesting things that you need to take note, hopefully be inspired by, and to reach out to continue changing the status quo. Welcome, Mr. Rogers. How are you doing this evening?
I am well, sir. You introduced me as Andy Anderson Rogers. It's Anthony. My actual name is Anthony, but most people know me as Andy.
Outstanding. Well, Anthony, welcome. We're here to talk about some research and also fighting for your freedom and your legacy and how that's brought you here. And hopefully that'll encourage others to fight for their own freedom, legacy, and their loved ones to know that you never should give up and you should keep continuing on. So let's talk about, the things that led you into a federal prison.
Right.
And the crime that you were wrongfully committed of.
Right. I was at the time I had just recently gotten out of the Army, and I was a drill sergeant in the reserves at Fort Knox, Kentucky. So I was driving from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Fort Knox, Kentucky every month and doing my drill sergeant duties there, where I was in E6 there. And I was also a Freemason, and that's going to come into play a lot here because I had a Freemason brother who was a 33rd degree, and I used to talk to him a lot. I was brand new but I studied a lot, and he could tell that I was studying and I knew a lot. And one particular Saturday afternoon, I went to his house just to talk because we talked a lot and everything else and stuff. So I went to his house, and when I walked in, I knocked on the door. When I walked in, I saw that he had company. So I did not intend to stay long and stuff. I said, a little bit to him and stuff, and then tried to make my exit. And he asked me, Brother Rogers, do you have your gun permit on you? Because he knows that I had an Indiana license to carry. He also had one. And so he asked me, Brother Rogers, do you have your gun permit on you? I said, yes, I do. He said, hey, I want you to pick up a weapon for me, a particular handgun for me at this gun store. So I asked him first, I said, why can't you do it? And so he said he misplaced his license and it would take him longer to get it since he wouldn't have his license on him. So I told him, okay, because I know it's not illegal to buy a weapon for someone. Fathers buy weapons for their children all the time, so it's not illegal to buy a weapon for someone. And that's going to come into play because the feds will have you believe it's illegal to buy a weapon for someone. They call it a straw purchase. Okay? That's the feds call it a straw purchase to buy a weapon for someone. But it is not illegal to buy. Okay, anyway. So he told me he misplaced his license. I said, okay, I'll pick it up for him. He gave me the money down to the dollar. So I left, I went to the gun store, and I bought that weapon for him. And while I was there, I also picked up another weapon for myself. The same kind of weapon. I just bought this one for myself. So I bought one for him and one for me. And I took the weapon and gave it to my girlfriend at that time. Because I wanted her to feel safe when I was not home. I spent a lot of weekends traveling, and I travel all over America, whatever. So I'm traveling here to Alabama.
Yeah.
Like I'm traveling here to Alabama now, but I travel a lot. So I gave my weapons. I gifted them to my girlfriend. She's now my wife. Okay, but I gifted them to her so she would feel safe in her apartment. I also had my own apartment across town, but I spent a lot of time with her. And so I gifted the weapons to her, and then the later that same Saturday, that evening, I took the weapon that I bought for my Masonic brother. I took that weapon to him, and I handed it to him outside of a Mason meeting we were having that evening. So at our cars and things, we were talking, and I gave him that weapon, and he put it in his car and locked it in his car and stuff. And I never thought about that weapon again. Okay, went on with the Mason meeting and everything else. Okay, so now fast forward 2 years later. I'm at my girlfriend's apartment, and I get a phone call from my stepdad, who is now, my stepdad is staying at my apartment, spending a lot of time at my apartment because I'm not there. So, he's there and stuff and all that. So he called me and said that some detectives came by looking for me, and they left a business card. So I told him, okay, I'll come right by and get it. So I came by that same day. I think it was a Sunday. This was 2 years later, remember, and this was a Sunday. So I got the card from him, and then I went to work, and I worked third shift at a factory in Fort Wayne. And when I got off work, I went to work that night, Sunday night. I got off Monday morning. I laid down for a couple hours, and then later on that morning, I called. It was an ATF agent from Chicago. The business card identified a particular ATF agent in Chicago, and I cannot recall his name, which is what I think is from my military career. I am extreme. I don't know if it's my military career directly with being in the war or whatever, or me growing up boxing, because my memory is gone. My short-term memory is shot. Somehow it comes back to me later on, but my short-term memory is gone. But I cannot recall this agent's name. But I called him in Chicago, and I said, "Hi, this is Anthony Rogers. I understand you're looking for me for something, for some reason." And he said, yes, he wants to talk to me. He has something he wants to talk to me about. I said, okay, what is it? He said, no, I want to talk to you in person. So I understand. I told him that I'd just gotten off work and things and stuff. So he told me, go ahead, get some sleep. And that he would be there in a few hours with his partners and stuff. So I said, okay. So we hung up. So about I laid down, went to sleep again. I can only sleep for a few hours at a time, maybe a couple of 2 to 3 hours at a time. Since the war, I have never slept more than 3 or 4 hours, maybe 3.5 hours at a time. I never sleep longer than that. So I woke up and it was about 3 o'clock. And I went out to the front room and it was like right on cue. I went out to the front room and I looked out. I told them to meet me at my girlfriend's apartment. Mm-hmm. Okay, so because that's where I pretty much stayed, even though I had my own apartment across town. But so they met me at they came in. I saw them pull up. It was like perfect timing. I went out to the living room, looked out the curtain, looked out the front window, and they were pulling up. Okay, they got out the car, came to the door. They knocked, I let them in, and as they came in, they each one introduced themselves to me as ATF agents, whatever and stuff, and they came in. The last one to come in asked me, he was the primary agent that did all the talking while at my girlfriend's apartment. He asked all the questions. And when he came in, and it turns out that it was 2 white officers and the black officer was their boss, their supervisor. Okay, I learned that later, that he was the top man in the Chicago office. So this white officer, I call him Agent B, because in my writings and stuff where I've written this down at why not.community is my not email address, but it's my website. Mm-hmm. It's Tony backwards. So it's YNOT.community. That's the site where you can read. I have all of this written down and stuff, so to the best of my ability, whatever. Okay, so now getting back to this, the officer, Agent B, Officer B, he asked me, as he came in the door, he asked me, "Do you have any guns in this apartment?" I said, "Yes, we have 2 weapons in the back." So he said, "Well, we need to bring those weapons out here before we start talking." And I'm thinking nothing of it. So I guess I went to the back room we have our second bedroom. I showed him where we keep a weapon in there. And then I took him to the main bedroom, and I opened up a drawer where my girlfriend's nightstand, where we keep a weapon there. So he took control of both weapons, mm-hmm. and we carried them back to the dining room table. And when we got to the dining room table, the other 2 agents were sitting there at the table. My girlfriend had dodged us somehow, but by this time, when we got to the dining room table, my girlfriend went back into the main bedroom and laid down. And so the agents, when we got to the dining room table, the agent laid the weapons, both weapons, down on the table. He said, "We are not here to talk about these weapons. We want to know about a weapon that you bought that turned up being used in a crime in Chicago." He said, "We're not charging you with anything having to do with that crime because we caught him. We caught the guy in the process of that crime. We just want to know, how did a gun that you bought here in Fort Wayne end up being used in a crime in Chicago?" Now, I learned later from the professional criminals in jail that I met in jail that I could have told them anything. Man, I lost that weapon and stuff and whatever, But that's not me. I was being honest. I told them, look, I bought that weapon for somebody else, and I never thought about that weapon again, because that's the only other weapon that I ever bought that's not in my control. So, so they asked me a lot of questions having to do with that weapon. And we talked about 40 minutes. And I told them, look, everything about that weapon and everything else that I knew, I just never knew anything about anybody doing a crime or anything else. So, and that was it. They thanked me. All three of them thanked me. All three of the ATF agents thanked me, and they shook my hand and thanked me for my candor, and they left. They told me, you're doing good here and stuff. We're in the military. You're in the military, and you're going to school, going to university. So, you're doing good stuff and all that. Okay, so they thanked me and left. They never charged me with anything, never said I was guilty of any crime. I asked them, before they left, I asked them, how do I get those weapons back? They said, just call the assistant U.S. attorney downtown. Okay, I said, okay, and then they left. I had done nothing wrong to this point, nothing unlawful. So, 2-3 weeks go by. I called the U.S. Attorney's office downtown Fort Wayne. I tell them my name, Anthony Rogers, and I'm trying to figure out, some ATF agents took some weapons from me from my apartment here, and they told me to call you guys to get the weapons back. Somebody at that Fort Wayne office told me to call the ATF office in Chicago. So I called the ATF office in Chicago, told them the same thing. Somebody at that office told me to call the Hammond, Indiana office. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I called the Hammond, Indiana office. Tell them who I am, Anthony Rogers, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm trying to get my guns back. They tell me to call the ATF office in Cincinnati.
Wow.
So, I'm already realizing what they're doing, but I'm playing along. So I call the ATF office in Cincinnati. They tell me to call the ATF office in Indianapolis. So they're just giving me the runaround. Okay, so at this point, I hang up. I call an attorney. I tell this attorney, look, the ATF agents are just giving me the runaround and stuff about my weapons. I'm trying to get some weapons back, and they're giving me the runaround and stuff. I'm not charged with anything unlawful. I just want my weapons back. So I talked to this attorney. His name is Harry Foster. I go meet Harry Foster. He tells me he can take the case and he'll take it. He'll take care of everything, come in and all that meeting. All okay. So I paid him what he charged. I paid him, and I said, okay, everything was okay. I just wanted my weapons back. Now, after about a month, Harry Foster calls me into his office. He calls me and asks me to come into his office. Can I meet him at at his office at a particular day and time. Okay, so I went there, and I was a drill sergeant in the Army, so I typically show up early for any appointments and stuff, just like because I'm sitting out in front of out in front of this building for an hour ahead of time. Okay, but so I show up at Harry Foster's office. Okay, so Harry, he tells me he wants to talk to me about something, so I'm there. Now, Harry Foster, he says he wants to talk to me about, he's got 2 papers for me to sign. Okay. He hands the first one to me, which is an immunity agreement. Turns out that the assistant U.S. attorney in Fort Wayne wants me to testify at a grand jury hearing about buying that weapon for my Masonic brother, because he turned out he sold it to some gang members in Chicago. Okay, so she wanted me to testify about buying that weapon for him, and so they gave me total immunity. Okay, so I signed that paper. They made a copy of it, gave it to me. Okay, good. Now, the second paper, he held out a piece of paper to me and said, the feds want you to sign over your weapons to the government. And I didn't even take that paper from him. I just looked at him crazy and I said, I'm not signing that paper. So he said, okay, I said, are you going to give me back the money that I paid you to get the weapons for me? So he said, no, he's not giving back any money and stuff, all that. So everything was okay. I signed the immunity agreement. I did not sign the paper signing over the weapons to the government. So he told me that the ATF agent, the U.S. attorney, wants me to testify at a grand jury hearing at a particular day and time. So, and to be at the U.S. attorney's office to be at the federal building in Fort Wayne at a particular day and time. Okay, so I get there. I show up early, as usual. So I get there and I see Harry and his son in the front office, in the hallway of the first floor. When I get in, I see Harry and his son. He's got his youngest son who adored me. I played with him and stuff and talked with him a lot and stuff and all of that. And I bet his son, he was about 10 or 12 years old, I think. But I spent some time with him and stuff. For some reason, he just took a natural liking to me. Okay, so, and I ended up buying him a military uniform. He liked the fact that I was in the military. I had been in the military and I was a drill sergeant. So I bought him a uniform, and his mother told me later on that he said, wow, how did he know my size? And everything else. So everything okay. So Harry and his foster were in the front room, in the hallway of the first floor when I got there. Now, Harry could not go into the office, into the grand jury room with me. So he just wanted to make sure that I did show up and stuff and all that. So, I showed up, shook Harry's hand and, messed around a little bit with his little son and everything else. And Tina Name, this is the first time I met her. She came downstairs, the U.S. attorney at Fort Wayne, an assistant U.S. attorney at Fort Wayne. So Tina Name, she came down, introduced herself to me, and then, she said a little bit to Harry, and then she took me upstairs to the grand jury room, to the ante room, which is a room right outside where the grand jury room is at. Okay, so She took me there, and then she asked me, did your attorney give you the paper signing your guns over to the government? I said, yes, he did. She said, did you sign it? I said, I have no intentions of signing that paper. I'm sure that response sparked something in her. Maybe she felt like I was getting smart with her, or she felt like she was going to teach me a lesson. Okay, but I could just sense that a change in her. So I said, I have no intentions of signing that paper. So she said, okay. And we went into the grand jury room. Grand jurors, about 30 of them. They asked me a lot of questions, firing questions after question at me. And then I answered all of their questions. And then she asked, okay, are there any more questions? And they said no. Then she asked me a few questions. I answered her questions. And then that was it. They excused me and I left. I walked out and left. Remember, I'm not charged with anything at this time. Mm-hmm. Okay? The ATF agents who interviewed me never said I did anything unlawful. They asked me about buying the weapon and stuff for this guy, whatever and stuff and all that, but I never did anything unlawful. Now, so I left. Now, about a month, 6 weeks later, my attorney calls me again and tells me to meet him at the federal building. He wants me to meet him at the federal building, and so I meet him at the same federal building, but this time we meet in front of a judge's office, in front of a courtroom. So we go into the courtroom. He tells me that the judge just wants to ask me a few questions before she returns the guns to me. Okay, I'm okay. So I go in there, and the judge asks me some questions about, she's trying to get me, all of a sudden I'm being charged as a felon in possession of a handgun. And the judge is asking me questions, about a plea. I'm signing up like I signed a plea agreement. I'm pleading guilty to being a felon in possession of a handgun. I'm looking at her crazy. And so she's asking me questions and stuff. And I'm like, look, I don't know anything about, being a felon in possession of a handgun. Now, what it was that when I was active duty in the military, when I got out, I finished active duty, and I had a friend of mine who also finished active duty, but he stayed at Fort Hood, in the Fort Hood area for a while, and we got to be pretty good friends and stuff. And so turns out he was dealing cocaine. Now, he asked me, I was riding in the car with him one time, and he stopped. Somebody had paged him, and so he stopped to sell this guy some crack. Now, he kept his crack in the glove compartment of his car. I'm in the passenger seat. He's in the driver's seat. He stops to talk to this guy, and he asked me to look in the glove compartment and hand him a piece of aluminum, one of those aluminum foil things, balled up aluminum foil. So I open up the glove compartment, take a look. I see few things, balled up aluminum foil. Okay, I take one out, give it to him. he gives it to this other guy, turns out to be he works for the feds or whatever. So I end up being charged in Texas. In Texas as a felon, I mean, for handing that aluminum foil thing to him, which had cocaine in it, crack cocaine. They charged me with delivering that cocaine to him. So they charge him with delivering it to the agent, the guy who stopped him was at his door. So
in sense, and I want to wrap up this first part real quick.
Yes.
So at the time, fast forward to the time where you're with the judge and they're charging you with the possession because of being charged as a felon years prior.
Yes.
And what did that judge ultimately charge you with?
Okay, the judge in Texas, for the charge of handing over I pled guilty to that charge, but he sealed. A guy was given probation. We were both given probation. But after I paid off the probation and everything, the judge sealed that case. The judge in Texas. So I didn't have anything against me anymore, and I was able to get back into the reserves. Because I was active duty in Texas. I went home, and I was after I did my probation, paid them off, everything else. They sealed that case, and I was able to get back into the Army Reserves. Okay, and I was able to, as a drill sergeant, as I got into the Army Reserves, and then the unit that I went to sent me. It was a drill sergeant unit. They sent me to drill sergeant school in Wisconsin. It's the only place. It's only two places you can go to drill sergeant school. One is at South Carolina, and the other one's in Wisconsin. Okay, so they sent me to drill sergeant school. Now, so that's why I told the ATF agent when they met me at my girlfriend's apartment. I told them all about that. Look, I had a felony, but that got sealed later on, and I was able to get back into the military. And now I'm a drill sergeant at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and all that stuff. So I go down there every month. Now, that's what that was about. And so what happened is, I'm sure those ATF agents from Chicago who came to my girlfriend's my apartment, I'm sure they put that in the report, whatever, that I had the felony, but it got sealed. So I'm positive that she made some calls to Texas to get that thing unsealed and stuff, and so they could hold it against me. So that's what that was about.
Okay. So we're going to take a quick break on this one, and then we're going to come back and from the time of that event,
yes,
and then follow up on what led you to going to prison and then how you worked yourself out.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
We'll be right back. All right. So I'm going to. So ultimately, what did the judge charge you with, and what time as a sentence did they give you?
The judge charged me with, there were 3 charges. I can only remember 2 of them, but there were 3 charges against me. Being a felon in possession of a handgun and knowingly making a false statement on a federal form at the dealer thing, because it asked me, am I the actual purchaser of the weapon being bought here and stuff? And so I put yes, I am the actual purchaser. But they charged me They said that I lied on that because I was buying it for somebody else. So, so if they play on words, the feds play on words like that, and so they say that I'm not the actual purchaser. He's the actual purchaser because he gave me the money, but I went to purchase it for him. So they're saying he was the actual purchaser. Okay, so, and there was another third charge, but I can't recall what that was. But so the judge said I was guilty. I ended up spending, they held me in jail. I ended up going to jail because my girlfriend, I was free all that time, okay, because I was not charged with anything. But my girlfriend and I got into a really hot fight, and the police got called. And so the police officer, seeing that I'm already
having charges pending,
yes,
or
in feds, he decided to take me to jail for domestic battery. Okay, now, so after a week or so, after about 2 weeks, that charge got dropped, but I never got out of jail. They kept me in jail, and I'm wondering what's going on and stuff. But it turns out that the U.S. assistant U.S. attorney put a no bond hold on me to keep me in jail. And they were trying to, and while I was in jail, I ended up spending 46 months 26 months, 26 months.
On the no hold domestic battery.
In a no hold bond, yes, in 26 months in jail. And then the judge, they held a bogus trial for me because I told them I'm not pleading guilty to this. I kept telling my attorney, I ended up he ended up quitting because I told him I was filing an agreement, filing something against him with the Indiana Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that ended our relationship. And so I ended up getting a federal public defender. That's his office. That's his job title. Federal community defender is what they call him there. So he was there. He tried to get me to sign so many papers and stuff, plea agreements. So they were trying to, he even lied to my face several times to get me to sign stuff and whatever, but I wouldn't sign it. And then eventually one time I did sign something for him. So I did say, okay, I can sign that so I pled guilty. And then when he left, he ran back to the courthouse to get that entered. And then when he left and went back after I signed it, I went and read it because I signed it before I actually read it. Mm-hmm. But I took his word for it when stuff and all that. Okay, but then when I read it, I saw that, no, this is not what he said. And so I called his office, and he wasn't in his office, but I left a message for him to say, look, I'm not pleading guilty to this. You lied to me, and I'm not pleading guilty to this charge. And so, okay, so that went on and stuff and all of that. Okay, so now I never pled guilty. Now, the judge at the trial, we finally had a trial. The judge, it was a bogus trial. I believe in my heart that the jury was told that I signed a plea agreement. Okay? I believe in my heart. They were told I signed a plea agreement because there was nothing. I proved when the judge, when he came over during the trial, the attorney, the ATF agent who asked me all the questions and stuff, he lied from the time he got on to the stand. He was lying about, my girlfriend kept a dirty house and he found the guns he saw the guns laying on the floor and stuff, and another one somewhere else and stuff. It was just dirty. The house was filthy. My girlfriend keeps an immaculate apartment. Okay, so he said that okay, he found the guns on the floor when he left. Now, my attorney got up and asked him a few normal perfunctory questions, and then he came over to me. He said he asked the court for time, and then he came over to me, leaned over like he was whispering, but he leaned over in a way so that the judge could see both of us clearly. And when he asked me, he said, "Can you think of anything else that I should ask him?" I'm looking at him crazy, and I turned and looked at her, and I could see her staring at me. So I turned back to him, and I put my fingers in front of my mouth, and I said, "Yes." Since he testified that he found the guns that he was looking for at my girlfriend's apartment, and everything, why didn't he arrest me? My attorney stood up immediately, and said, "That's a good question." And so then he went back and asked the Agent B, you testified that you were, he asked him questions that he should have asked him from the jump start. Did you have a warrant for the weapons? No, he didn't. When he asked him, he said, you testified that you were looking for the weapons that you found at Anthony's apartment. Why didn't you arrest him? The agent immediately threw his head back like that because he wasn't expecting that question. And so, they had trained him, told him, fed him all the stuff that they wanted him to say and everything, but because they were trying to, even the public defender, even he was working against me. They were working in cahoots and stuff and all that. So he threw his head back, and so that was it. They asked him, then he started asking him a bunch of questions that he couldn't answer to. He said, "Well, did you have since you testified that you were looking for the weapons that Anthony had and you found them at his apartment, did you have any weapons? Did you have a warrant for those weapons?" He said no, and all this stuff. It was a bunch of questions that he said no to. That he had to answer no to and everything else. So that ruined the case against me. So now they got me on the stand and asked me, I know that he just got me. There was nothing for me to testify about, but there was no case against me. So my attorney got me on the stand, and I know he just got it just so that she could ask me some questions. The U.S. attorney, she asked me, why didn't I tell him that I had a gun license, or that it was something, but I don't remember. But I remember yelling because he never asked me. And that shook the court, whatever and stuff, and so she walked over to the judge and they started whispering and stuff, and then she said no further questions, and that was it. So then I went that was it. My girlfriend testified about something, whatever, but then it was that. Okay, so then that closed the case. And then I went and sat in a holding cell and came back to the courtroom, and the judge said, "Will the jury foreperson please stand?" I remember seeing a white woman stand up. Okay, and she asked, bring that to her. And the judge barely even looked at it. She took that paperwork and barely even looked at it. And then she said, "Mr. Rogers, the court finds you guilty of all charges." And I just put my head down. And I'm like, how could they find me guilty of anything? But I believe the jury was told that I signed a plea agreement. I can never prove it, but that's where that stops at. That's where that starts, so that's that.
Okay. Now, I think what people are also wanting to know and be inspired by and maybe learn from is exactly the time that they gave you. And did you have to serve that whole time? How much time did they give you?
They sentenced me to 46 months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, and 3 years, 3 years of they call it something, I forget now, but.
And did you have to serve that full time?
I served the 46 months. Most of it I spent in the Allen County Jail because I spent 26 months in that jail. And so eventually they sent me just before Thanksgiving. They sent me to Oklahoma. We flew to Oklahoma. We flew from Terre Haute to Detroit, then to Chicago, then to Oklahoma. And then I spent the night in Oklahoma at a county jail there. The plane let some people off directly into the federal jail, and then took us to federal prison, and then took us to the county jail. I spent one night in the county jail. They took me and flew me to Pittsburgh. At Pittsburgh, I got off the plane and got into a van, and they took me to Ohio at a federal prison there.
And that's where you served out the rest of the...
And that's where I served my time there.
And
yes.
so you served the full 46?
For the 46 months, all but like 6 months, whatever. I spent my time there. And then, so then I got out of prison. They let me go home. Well, I had to stay at a house, something, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But so I got home. I couldn't go home. I had to stay in this house, whatever. But then I had 3 years of probation, basically. They call it something else in the feds, but it's called I had 3 years of that. So I was sentenced to 46 months prison and then 3 years probation.
Okay. Now, through that time, were you able to either go back and try to have those things, either overturned or, closed on your record, or how did you redeem, that wrong that they did on that? It did, as it stands as of today,
Yes.
what were you able to do anything about that to let them know, like, hey, you guys made a mistake, or, hey, I need some restitution for this?
Right. Okay. I do have a degree from Indiana University. Mm-hmm. I'm not a totally stupid person. And I kept asking, while they held me in jail, I kept asking the professional criminals in the jail, even if I did this, what they're charging me with, what makes it a federal crime? And the professional criminals in jail told me, hey, the feds can do whatever they want to do. Mm. And so, but that just didn't seem right to me. At the Allen County Jail, they don't let you go to the library or anything I had to spend my time walking around in that tank. Never go to, so that's the only information I got was the feds can do whatever they want to do. So when they sent me to prison, I spent all of my time in the law library. All of my time in the law library.
What would you say is one of the, for folks that are maybe facing some of the same circumstances, or folks that are looking to help, or, even folks that may be behind the wall, what advice would you give them of, learning the law or learning how to fight for their case and the things that you learned, what would your advice be to them?
Okay, I learned, and I spent all of my time in the law library, like I said, and I learned a hell of a lot. And I put together a foolproof case against the feds. Okay, now people say, "Oh man, okay, yeah, you can't win against the feds and stuff and all that." But a guy from the feds who heard us talking when I was in the federal prison in Chicago, when they spent me, that's where I spent my 3 years probation. Mm-hmm. They put me back in. They put a bogus charge on me and sent me back to prison. And I spent all that time in federal prison in Chicago, in downtown Chicago. And there was a black guy who worked at the prison for like 26 years, whatever. He was high up in the prison. But he said he heard us talking. And I was telling them, look, I'm suing the feds and yada, yada, yada and stuff. And the other prisoners in there, they were saying, man, you can't sue the feds, all that stuff and all that. And this guy who had been there for whatever and stuff, he interrupted. He said, actually, he's right. Actually, he's right. But lead is cheaper than gold. And I knew exactly what he meant as soon as he said it. Actually, he's right, but lead is cheaper than gold.
And break that down.
The feds would rather kill me than pay me. Because I'm suing the feds. When I got home out of prison and before they put the charge on me, I filed a lawsuit against the feds for $40 billion. Okay? Now, and there was a newspaper there called Frost Illustrated, which is the black newspaper there. Well, as soon as they printed this story, the feds closed it down or bought them out or something. But this story is one of the last stories. Me suing the feds for $40 billion. And then when they sent me back to prison, when the feds sent me back to prison, the writer who did the story, he went and interviewed my mother and stuff, and so they did another story on me. And see, this is 3 because it's the 3rd story they did on me. But this story talks about them sending me back to prison on another bogus charge, and they just wanted me because I had filed my lawsuit against them, and they wanted me off the street. So the feds, they do bogus things. Okay, now what I'm telling you, what I learned and what I filed against them is a airtight lawsuit against them for jurisdiction, unlawful jurisdiction, because the feds have no authority. The feds want you to think that they have blanket authority over all of America. Okay, but they don't. The United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. I'll say it again slowly. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 states the jurisdiction of the federal government. The first it's a paragraph. The first part of that paragraph deals with Washington, D.C. Shall have exclusive legislation over such district not exceeding 10 miles square, which may become, okay. That's the first part of that deals with Washington, D.C. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Okay. And then the second part of that paragraph deals with military installations in the United States. They only have jurisdiction on federal property. Okay? As soon as, because I know when I was at Fort Hood, there were a lot of people who would do stuff and get pulled over for speeding, but they would take off out the gate. And the MPs cannot chase you off the gate, off base. So if you could make it out the gate, you were free.
Well, and speaking of freedom, I think information is definitely freedom. I think that using that information and finding it out and sharing it with others is freedom. And you have a lot of information at your website. So I want to close with your website and what people can find there and the work that you're doing.
Okay, what I want to do is grab that board.
Oh, let me get that for you. Let's see. Oh. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Okay. The federal government, the federal government has a contract with all of the states. And so they pay them money and everything else. So the contract is to only teach the United States Constitution, the federal Constitution. But they changed the name of it to United States Constitution so that we're all trained to think that's a blanket constitution for all of America, but it's not. It only applies to Washington, D.C. Every state has its own constitution, and Indiana Constitution, it go Article 14, Section 1 lists the boundaries of the Indiana Constitution. This is the Indiana Constitution. This is the federal Constitution. Only has jurisdiction here in Washington, D.C. So if you step out of this 10-mile circle, going to Bowie, Maryland, or to Fairfax and stuff, you're out of federal jurisdiction. Okay, but everybody pays taxes, federal income taxes. But why? Nobody understands why. Listen, federal income taxes are bogus for anybody outside of this circle, outside of Washington, D.C., and or military installations, Fort Hood, Texas, where I was retired from. Now, say, why do you pay taxes? Why do you pay taxes to Washington, D.C.? Texas has no states. State is just the political word meaning country. Okay? So just like Europe is divided into countries, United States is divided into countries as well, but we call them states because that's the political word for it, and we grow up calling it states, and so that's where you get used to hearing. But Texas is its own country, and Indiana is its own country, and every state has its own constitution. The federal Constitution, the boundaries are set at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Indiana's Constitution, the boundaries are set at Article 14, Section 1 and Section 2. In order that the boundaries for the state may be known and established, it is hereby ordained and declared that the state of Indiana be bounded on the side by the meridian line, which forms the western boundary of the state of Ohio. On the south, by the Ohio River, and on the west, and all of that. I'm not going to say that, but I mean go into all of that. But every state has its own constitution, but we're not taught that in school. And if people who know about it, you just happen to hear about it from some people talking, whatever, but you're not taught that in school. Why? Because the feds they pay the states to only teach the United States Constitution as if that's the Constitution for all of America. And it's not. It's not. That's the federal Constitution, which only applies to federal territory. So if I was to sell, if I'm not even trying to hide, and I'm selling loads of cocaine out there, I ain't even trying to hide. What makes that a federal crime? If I'm selling out, if people pull up and I'm selling out cocaine here, I just hand them cocaine, they give me money. Why is that a federal crime? If I'm doing it here in Alabama, what makes that a Texas crime? Can the Texas police charge me for selling cocaine here? No. I'm on Alabama property. And that's the main thing. So everybody who's in federal court right now, it's a joke, because all you have to do is challenge their territorial jurisdiction. Feds have no territorial jurisdiction. They want to change that into subject matter. They'll start talking, because they're lawyers, and they'll start talking and they'll say, switch it to subject matter jurisdiction. Okay? And subject matter jurisdiction, don't let them switch it with you and all of that. You're challenging their territorial jurisdiction. And there's nothing I can do right here that is a federal crime. Nothing. It's just like if I do it here, Texas cannot charge me for selling cocaine out of this door. I'm not even trying to hide. Texas cannot charge me. Alabama, Louisiana cannot charge me. Nobody can charge me, only Alabama. Okay? And the feds will do that. They'll come out here and they'll try to, because they do that is one main reason, and it's for money. Because everybody pays federal income taxes because you think that you have to, because that's the government. But that's not your government. Their limits, they're the federal government. They have a list of things that they're tasked to do. They were created to do. That's Article 1, Section 8. It's a list of it. Okay? And Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 limits their jurisdiction to right there, Washington, D.C. So if I live in Indiana, if I live in Texas, if I live in Virginia, why am I obligated to pay federal income taxes? You're not. But that was with the man. See my memory, man. Okay, but the federal government did a test many years ago. Prohibition, where the federal government made a law, and they wanted to see if they could make a law in Washington, D.C. They wanted to see if they could make a law in Washington, D.C. and enforce it in the states. Now, constitutionally, they cannot. But since we're taught the U.S. Constitution in school, we think that the feds have a blanket authority over all of America, and they don't. Texas has its own constitution. Alabama has its own constitution. Indiana has its own constitution. And in the Indiana Constitution, like I said, Article 14, Section 1, gives us the limits right here. So if I'm here, if I go over here, I'm outside of Indiana. I'm in Illinois, actually. So, but every constitution has its limits.
And I think that's something that people definitely need to know about.
Yes,
those
they need
that
to
are, that are facing federal charges or federal cases, how do they get in contact with you for if they need help or if they just need some guidance or just, someone that can guide them in the right way? Is there information that they could reach out or places where they can get in contact with you?
I do have a website. It is, like I said, my name is Anthony, so Tony, and so Tony backwards. It's www.why not.community. Okay, www.ynot.community.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony. Like, we definitely make sure that this goes out, and I want people to share this. I want people to tag and give it to folks that can spread the information out, different organizations from city to city, county to county, to let them know that there are resources and that there's ways to empower themselves and to know that they have all the information that they need. And hopefully by them listening to your story and watching today, I hope that they were able to walk away encouraged and feel that there's more to be done and give themselves a little bit of hope for sure. So definitely thank you for your time with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity.